In the glittering heart of New York City, where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and the streets pulsed with ambition, there lived a man named Michael Thornton. Take a moment to leave a like and comment your city so I know where you're watching from. To the world, he was the epitome of success, a self-made millionaire with a golden touch, a man who could turn failing businesses into empires with a mere glance. His name graced the covers of financial magazines, his face a common sight on television screens across the nation. Yet behind the facade of wealth and power, Michael harbored a secret that gnawed at his soul, a profound, aching loneliness that no amount of money could soothe. As the sun set on another day of boardroom battles and multi-million-dollar deals, Michael found himself standing before the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse apartment. The city sprawled before him, a tapestry of twinkling lights and bustling streets. But instead of pride or satisfaction, he felt only a hollow emptiness. His reflection stared back at him from the glass. A man in his early 40s with salt and pepper hair and eyes that had long lost their spark. "Is this all there is?" he whispered to the empty room, his words hanging heavy in the air. Michael's mind wandered back to his humble beginnings, to the small town in Ohio, where he'd grown up dreaming of making it big. He remembered the warmth of his parents' smiles, the genuine laughter of childhood friends, the simple joy of a shared meal. Somewhere along his journey to the top, he'd lost touch with those pure, uncomplicated moments of human connection. Now, surrounded by luxury and opulence, Michael felt more alone than ever. His days were filled with sycophants and yes-men, people who saw him not as a person, but as a means to an end. Every smile seemed fake, every compliment calculated. Even his romantic relationships had become transactional, a parade of beautiful women more interested in his bank account than his heart. The breaking point came on a crisp autumn evening at a charity gala hosted in one of the city's most prestigious hotels. Michael stood at the bar, nursing a glass of scotch, when he overheard a conversation that would change the course of his life. "Did you see Thornton over there?" A woman in a shimmering gown whispered to her companion. "I heard he's worth over $1 billion now. Can you imagine?" The man beside her chuckled, his voice dripping with disdain. "All the money in the world and he still looks miserable. I guess it's true what they say. Money can't buy happiness." "Oh, please," the woman scoffed. "With that kind of wealth, who needs happiness? I'd trade places with him in a heartbeat." Their laughter cut through Michael like a knife. Is that all he was to people? A dollar sign? A ticket to a life of luxury? The realization hit him with the force of a freight train. In his relentless pursuit of wealth, he'd lost sight of what truly mattered in life. Overwhelmed by a sudden wave of nausea, Michael stumbled out of the ballroom and into the cool night air. The city's cacophony faded into the background as he leaned against a nearby building, his heart pounding in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt utterly lost. It was in this moment of vulnerability that fate intervened. An old woman, her clothes tattered and her face weathered by years on the street, approached him with an outstretched hand. "Spare some change, sir?" she asked, her voice gravelly but kind. Michael looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time truly seeing one of the many homeless individuals he passed by every day. In her eyes, he saw a depth of experience, a life lived on the fringes of the society he'd conquered. Without a word, he reached into his pocket and pressed a $100 bill into her palm. The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. "God bless you, sir," she said, tears welling up in her eyes. "You don't know what this means to me." As she shuffled away, clutching the money to her chest, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a genuine sense of warmth, of having made a real difference in someone's life. It was a small act, insignificant in the grand scheme of his vast wealth, but it stirred something within him. That night, as he lay in his king-sized bed, unable to sleep, an idea began to form in Michael's mind. It was crazy, perhaps even dangerous, but the more he thought about it, the more right it felt. If he wanted to find genuine human connection, to discover who he truly was beneath the trappings of wealth, he would need to strip it all away. The next morning, Michael called his most trusted employee, his longtime housemaid and confidant, Maria. She'd been with him since the early days of his success, one of the few people who knew the man behind the millionaire mask. "Maria," he said, his voice filled with a determination she hadn't heard in years, "I need your help with something unconventional." Over the next few days, Michael put his plan into motion. He set up a series of automated systems to keep his businesses running in his absence. He made arrangements for his assets to be managed discreetly, and most importantly, he began to craft his new identity. Gone were the tailored suits and designer watches. In their place, Michael donned threadbare jeans and a worn-out jacket. He let his normally immaculate beard grow out, unkempt and scraggly. With the help of a theatrical makeup artist sworn to secrecy, he learned to alter his appearance, adding years to his face and a lifetime of hardship to his demeanor. On the night before his grand experiment was to begin, Michael stood before the mirror in his bathroom, barely recognizing the man who stared back at him. The transformation was startling. Where once stood a polished businessman, now there was a weary, down-on-his-luck individual who could easily blend in with the city's homeless population. "Are you sure about this, Mr. Thornton?" Maria asked, concern evident in her voice. "It could be dangerous out there." Michael turned to her, a mix of fear and excitement in his eyes. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life, Maria. I need to do this. I need to find out who I am when everything else is stripped away." As the first light of dawn broke over the city, Michael Thornton, billionaire, tycoon, lonely soul, stepped out of his penthouse and into a world he barely knew. With nothing but the clothes on his back and a small amount of cash hidden away for emergencies, he began his journey into the unknown. The streets of New York City took on a different character in the early morning hours. Michael had always viewed the city from the comfort of his chauffeured car or the heights of his office tower. Now, at ground level, he saw a side of urban life he'd never truly noticed before. The first few hours were a shock to his system. People rushed by, their eyes glazed over, barely registering his presence. When they did notice him, it was often with a mixture of pity and discomfort. Michael found himself involuntarily shrinking away from their gazes, feeling for the first time the weight of societal judgment. By midday, hunger began to gnaw at his stomach. The realization that he couldn't simply walk into a restaurant and order whatever he wanted was a sobering one. Instead, he found himself outside a small deli, eyeing the display of sandwiches with a longing he'd never experienced before. As he stood there, debating whether to use some of his emergency cash, a young woman exited the deli. She paused, noticing Michael's gaze, and without a word handed him half of her sandwich. "Here," she said with a small smile. "Everyone deserves a meal." The simple act of kindness nearly brought tears to Michael's eyes. He mumbled a thank you, his voice rough with emotion. As he ate the sandwich, a simple turkey on wheat that tasted better than any gourmet meal he'd ever had, Michael felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps there was still goodness in the world, hidden in unexpected places. As night fell, the true challenge began. Where would he sleep? The shelters were full, and the idea of spending the night on the streets filled him with a primal fear. He eventually found a relatively secluded spot in a small park, using his jacket as a makeshift blanket. Lying there, looking up at the stars barely visible through the city's light pollution, Michael felt more alive than he had in years. Every sound, every sensation was heightened. The discomfort of the hard ground beneath him, the chill of the night air. It all served to remind him that he was embarking on something real, something that mattered. Days passed, blending into one another. Michael learned the rhythms of street life, where to find food, how to stay warm, how to avoid trouble. He met others in similar situations, each with their own story of how they'd ended up on the streets. Their resilience in the face of adversity humbled him, making him question every assumption he'd ever had about success and failure. It was on his 7th day of this new life that Michael met Sophia. He was sitting on a bench in Washington Square Park, watching children play and couples stroll by, when she approached him with a brown paper bag. "Hungry?" she asked, her voice kind but not patronizing. Michael looked up, startled by the directness of her gaze. Sophia was in her early 30s, with warm brown eyes and a mess of curly hair pulled back into a ponytail. She wore jeans and a faded t-shirt bearing the logo of a local shelter. I... Yes, thank you, Michael replied, accepting the bag. Inside was a sandwich, an apple, and a bottle of water. Sophia sat down beside him, pulling out her own lunch. I'm Sophia, she said, offering her hand. I volunteer at the shelter down the street. Michael, he responded, using his real first name but careful not to give away any more details. Thank you for this. It means a lot. They sat in companionable silence for a while, eating their lunches and watching the world go by. Michael found himself stealing glances at Sophia, intrigued by her presence. There was a quiet strength about her, a sense of purpose that radiated from within. So, Michael, Sophia said eventually, turning to face him. What's your story? How did you end up here? For a moment, Michael panicked. He hadn't prepared a detailed backstory, and he was wary of lying outright. Instead, he decided to speak from the heart, sharing a version of the truth that omitted his true identity. I lost my way, he began hesitantly. I had a life that looked good on paper, but it felt empty. I walked away from it all, trying to figure out who I really am when you strip everything else away. Sophia listened attentively, her eyes never leaving his face. There was no judgment in her expression, only genuine interest and compassion. That's brave, she said finally. Not many people have the courage to walk away from comfort to seek something deeper. Her words touched something in Michael. A part of himself he'd long neglected. For the first time in years, he felt truly seen, not for his wealth or his accomplishments, but for the person he was, beneath it all. As the days turned into weeks, Michael found himself drawn more and more to Sophia. They would meet in the park or at the shelter where she volunteered, talking for hours about life, dreams, and the state of the world. Sophia shared her own story, how she'd left a promising career in finance to dedicate her life to helping others, inspired by a personal tragedy that had opened her eyes to the struggles of those less fortunate. Michael was in awe of her dedication, her unwavering commitment to making a difference in the lives of others. He began to volunteer at the shelter as well, finding a sense of purpose in the simple act of serving meals or offering a kind word to those in need. As his feelings for Sophia grew, so did the weight of his deception. Every smile, every touch, every moment of connection was tinged with the knowledge that he wasn't being entirely truthful. Michael found himself torn between the desire to reveal his true identity and the fear of losing the one genuine relationship he'd formed in years. The turning point came on a rainy evening in late autumn. Michael and Sophia were huddled under the awning of a closed shop, watching the rain fall in sheets across the city streets. The air was thick with the scent of wet pavement and the distant rumble of thunder. You know, Sophia said, her voice soft and contemplative, I used to think that money was the answer to everything, that if I could just make enough, I could solve all the world's problems. Michael felt his heart rate quicken. What changed your mind? He asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. Sophia turned to him, her eyes shining with a mixture of sadness and determination. I realized that the problems run deeper than that. It's not just about money. It's about how we see each other, how we treat each other. The richest man in the world could walk by a homeless person without a second glance. But sometimes, a person with nothing to their name will share their last piece of bread with a stranger. Her words hit Michael like a physical blow. He saw himself in her description of the rich man, blind to the suffering around him, but he also saw the person he was trying to become, the one who would share what little he had. In that moment, standing in the rain with the woman he had come to love, Michael made a decision. He couldn't continue living a lie, not if he wanted a chance at true happiness. Sophia, he said, his voice trembling slightly, there's something I need to tell you. But before he could continue, a voice called out from across the street. Michael? Michael Thornton, is that you? Michael turned, his blood running cold. There, stepping out of a sleek black car, was James Henderson, one of his business associates. James approached, his face a mask of confusion and concern. My God, Michael, what happened to you? Everyone's been worried sick. Are you all right? Sophia looked between Michael and James, her expression shifting from confusion to hurt to anger. Michael, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on?" The truth came pouring out in a rush of words. Michael explained everything: his life as a millionaire, his feelings of emptiness, his decision to live on the streets. He watched as Sophia's face hardened, her eyes filling with tears of betrayal. "So it was all a lie?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Everything between us. It was just, what? An experiment? A game?" "No, Sophia, please," Michael pleaded, reaching for her hand. But she pulled away, shaking her head. "I trusted you, Michael. I opened up to you, shared things I've never told anyone else. And all this time you were just pretending." Before Michael could respond, Sophia turned and walked away, disappearing into the rainy night. He stood there, soaked to the bone, feeling as though his heart had been ripped from his chest. In the days that followed, Michael's world fell apart. He returned to his old life, but everything felt hollow and meaningless. The board meetings, the luxury, the adoring crowds, none of it mattered anymore. All he could think about was Sophia and the look of betrayal in her eyes. Determined to make things right, Michael threw himself into charity work with a fervor that shocked his business associates. He donated millions to homeless shelters and outreach programs. He used his influence to push for policy changes to address systemic poverty. But no matter how much he gave, it couldn't fill the void left by Sophia's absence. Weeks turned into months. Michael's transformation became the talk of the city. Newspapers ran headlines like "Millionaire's Awakening, Thornton's Journey from Tycoon to Philanthropist." But for Michael, it wasn't about the publicity. It was about becoming the person he knew he could be, the person Sophia had seen glimpses of during their time together. It was a chilly spring morning when Michael finally saw her again. He was serving breakfast at the shelter where they had first met, having made it a weekly habit to work alongside the other volunteers. Sophia walked in, stopping short when she saw him behind the counter. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world seemed to stand still. Then Sophia approached, her expression guarded but not hostile. "You're still here," she said softly. Michael nodded, his heart pounding. "I'm trying to make amends," he replied, "not just with you, but with myself, with the world." Sophia studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face for any sign of deception. But all she saw was sincerity and a deep, abiding regret. "I've heard about what you've been doing," she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "The donations, the policy work. It's impressive." Michael shook his head. "It's not about impressing anyone. It's about doing what's right, what I should have been doing all along." A small line appeared between Sophia's brows as she considered his words. "And this?" She gestured to his apron, to the ladle in his hand. "Is this just for show?" "No," Michael replied, his voice firm. "This is real. Being here, helping people face to face, it reminds me of why I'm doing all of this. It keeps me grounded." Sophia's expression softened slightly, but the wariness didn't leave her eyes. "I want to believe you, Michael, but you lied to me for so long. How can I trust anything you say now?" The question hung between them, heavy with the weight of past deceptions and fragile hope. Michael took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts before responding. "You can't," he said finally. "Not right away. Trust has to be earned, and I know I've got a long way to go. But if you'll let me, I'd like to try. Not as the man I was pretending to be, and not as the millionaire I used to be. Just as me, Michael, trying to be better every day." For a moment, Sophia said nothing. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "I can't promise anything," she warned. "But I'm willing to see where this goes." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start, a tiny crack in the wall that had risen between them. As Sophia moved down the line to get her breakfast, Michael felt a glimmer of hope spark in his chest. He knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in months, he felt like he was on the right path. Over the following weeks, Michael and Sophia began the slow, careful process of rebuilding their relationship. They started small, with conversations over coffee after volunteer shifts at the shelter. Michael was painfully honest, answering every question Sophia had about his past and his motivations. He shared the loneliness that had driven him to his deception, the emptiness he had felt at the height of his success. Sophia, in turn, opened up about her own struggles. She spoke of the brother she had lost to addiction, the event that had spurred her to leave her corporate job and dedicate her life to helping others. As they talked, they discovered a deeper understanding of each other, one built on shared values and mutual respect. Their work at the shelter took on new meaning as they collaborated on projects to improve the lives of the homeless in their community. Michael used his business acumen to streamline operations and secure additional funding, while Sophia's compassion and on-the-ground experience ensured that their efforts truly met the needs of those they were trying to help. One crisp autumn evening, almost a year after their reunion, Michael and Sophia found themselves back in Washington Square Park. The trees were aflame with fall colors, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of distant bonfires. They sat on the same bench where they had shared their first meal together, though so much had changed since then. "Do you ever miss it?" Sophia asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence that had fallen between them. "Your old life, I mean. The luxury, the power." Michael considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted. "There are moments when I miss the simplicity of throwing money at a problem and considering it solved. But then I remember how empty it all felt, how disconnected I was from the real world." He turned to face her, his eyes serious. "What I've found since then, purpose, connection, the feeling that I'm making a real difference, that's worth more than all the millions I ever had." Sophia's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. "You've changed so much," she said softly. "Sometimes I can hardly believe you're the same person I met in this park a year ago." "I'm not," Michael replied. "That person was lost, trying to find himself. The man I am now. He's still learning, still growing, but he knows who he is and what he wants." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the last of the walls between them crumbled. Sophia leaned in, her lips meeting Michael's in a kiss that spoke of forgiveness, of new beginnings, of a love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. As they parted, both slightly breathless, Michael felt a sense of peace wash over him. He realized that his journey, from millionaire to beggar and back again, had led him exactly where he needed to be. He had lost a fortune, but gained something far more valuable, a life rich in meaning, purpose, and love. The sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Michael and Sophia sat hand in hand, watching as the city transitioned from day to night. They knew that challenges lay ahead. There was still so much work to be done, so many lives to touch. But together they felt ready to face whatever came their way. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Michael made a silent vow. He would never forget the lessons he had learned, the people he had met, the struggles he had witnessed. His wealth would be a tool for change, not a barrier between him and the world. And with Sophia by his side, he would strive every day to be the best version of himself, not for the accolades or the recognition, but for the simple joy of making a difference. The story of Michael Thornton, the millionaire who became a beggar to find true love, didn't end with a happily ever after. Instead, it opened a new chapter, one filled with purpose, compassion, and the kind of wealth that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. As they walked out of the park, hand in hand, Michael and Sophia stepped into a future bright with possibility, ready to write the next pages of their story together. In the years that followed, Michael and Sophia's partnership blossomed into a powerful force for change in the city. They founded a non-profit organization dedicated to addressing the root causes of homelessness, combining Michael's business acumen with Sophia's grassroots experience. Their approach was holistic, focusing not just on providing shelter, but also on job training, mental health support, and advocacy for affordable housing policies. Their work wasn't without challenges. They faced bureaucratic roadblocks, skepticism from both the business world and the nonprofit sector, and the sheer enormity of the problem they were trying to solve. There were nights when they both lay awake, overwhelmed by the stories of those they couldn't help, the lives they couldn't change. But for every setback, there were moments of triumph. the first time a family moved from their shelter into a permanent home. The day a former addict celebrated 1 year of sobriety and a new job. The passing of a city ordinance they had championed, allocating more resources to homeless services. These victories, small and large, fueled their determination and reminded them why they had chosen this path. As their influence grew, Michael and Sophia were invited to speak at conferences, to consult with other cities on their homelessness strategies. They traveled the country, sharing their story and the lessons they had learned. Michael, once known for his cutthroat business tactics, became renowned for his compassionate approach to social issues. Sophia, who had once worked in the shadows, emerged as a powerful voice for the voiceless. Their personal relationship deepened alongside their professional one. They were married on a bright spring day, in a simple ceremony at the shelter where they had reconnected. Their vows spoke not just of love for each other, but of their shared commitment to making the world a better place. The guests were an eclectic mix: business leaders and politicians seated alongside shelter residents and social workers. It was a testament to the bridges they had built, the divides they had crossed. As the years passed, Michael and Sophia's family grew. They adopted 2 children, siblings who had been living in the foster care system. Parenting brought new challenges and joys, deepening their understanding of the importance of stability and love in a child's life. Their home became a place of warmth and laughter, a stark contrast to the cold, empty mansion Michael had once inhabited. They made sure their children understood the value of compassion and the responsibility that came with privilege. Family volunteering days became a regular occurrence, with even the youngest members contributing in small ways to the cause their parents had devoted their lives to. On the 10th anniversary of the day, Michael had first disguised himself as a homeless man. He and Sophia returned to Washington Square Park. The city had changed in the decade that had passed. New buildings had risen, old ones had fallen. But the park remained, a green oasis in the urban landscape. They sat on their bench, now weathered and worn but still standing. Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, wrapped package. "What's this?" Sophia asked, curiosity lighting up her eyes. "Open it," Michael urged gently. Inside was a simple silver locket. When Sophia opened it, she found 2 photos, one of them on their wedding day and one of the park bench where they sat. "To remind us of where we've been," Michael said softly, "and where we're going." Sophia's eyes filled with tears as she clasped the locket around her neck. "I love you," she whispered, leaning in to kiss him. As they sat there holding each other close, they reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The mistakes, the pain, the growth, the joy. All of it had led them here, to a life richer and more fulfilling than either of them could have imagined. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of the city, car horns, laughter, the endless rhythm of urban life. But here, in this moment, there was peace. Michael looked at Sophia, at the woman who had seen through his deception to the man he could become, who had challenged him to be better, who had loved him not for his wealth but for his heart. He thought of the lives they had touched, the changes they had made, the work that still lay ahead. And he knew, with a certainty that ran bone deep, that this life, this love, this purpose, was the true happy ending to his story. Not an ending at all, really, but a beginning that stretched out before them, full of possibility and hope. As they stood to leave, hand in hand, Michael cast one last look at the bench where it had all started. In that moment, he sent a silent thank you to the universe, for second chances, for love that sees beyond appearances, and for the transformative power of compassion. Together, Michael and Sophia walked out of the park and into the gathering twilight, ready to face whatever challenges the future might hold. They had each other, they had their purpose, and they had the knowledge that one person, or 2 people, really could make a difference in the world. And so, the story of the millionaire who became a beggar to find true love became a legend in the city. But for Michael and Sophia, it wasn't a legend. It was their life, their love, their ongoing journey, a journey that had taught them the most valuable lesson of all, that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the lives you touch, the love you share, and the positive change you bring to the world. As night fell over New York City, the lights of a million stories twinkled in the darkness, and among them, brighter than ever, shone the light of two souls who had found each other against all odds, who had turned a deception into a mission, and who continued to prove day after day that love, true, deep, compassionate love, really could change the world. As the years rolled by, Michael and Sophia's legacy continued to grow, touching lives far beyond the borders of New York City. Their innovative approach to combating homelessness became a model for cities across the nation, and even internationally. But success on such a grand scale brought its own set of challenges and temptations. There were moments when Michael felt the pull of his old life, the allure of power, the simplicity of solving problems with money rather than hard work and patience. Sophia, too, sometimes struggled with the transition from grassroots activist to public figure. They found themselves navigating a complex world of politics, media attention, and conflicting interests. One particularly trying period came when a series of investigative articles questioned the efficacy of their programs. Critics argued that their approach was too soft, that they were enabling rather than solving the problem of homelessness. The accusations stung, not just because of the potential damage to their work, but because they forced Michael and Sophia to confront their own doubts and fears. Late one night, after a particularly grueling day of damage control and soul-searching, Michael found Sophia sitting on their balcony, gazing out at the city lights. He joined her, the weight of the day's struggles evident in the slump of his shoulders. "Do you ever wonder if we're really making a difference?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "If all of this is worth it?" Michael was silent for a long moment, considering her words. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn, creased photograph. It was a picture of them at the shelter on their first anniversary, surrounded by smiling faces, people whose lives they had touched. "Remember Carlos?" Michael asked, pointing to a young man in the photo. "The kid who came to us addicted, angry, with nowhere to go? I ran into him last week. He's 3 years sober now, has a steady job, just got engaged." Sophia's eyes misted over as she took the photo, running her fingers gently over the familiar faces. "And Maria," she added, indicating an older woman beaming at the camera. "She's managing that bakery program we started. Did you know she's training other women now?" They sat together, recounting story after story of lives changed, of hope restored. With each memory, the weight of their current struggles seemed to lighten. "We can't solve everything," Michael said finally, taking Sophia's hand in his. "But every life we touch, every person we help find their way, that's a victory. That's what makes it all worth it." Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder, a sense of renewed purpose washing over her. "You're right," she murmured. "We just need to keep remembering why we started this journey in the first place." The next morning, energized by their renewed conviction, Michael and Sophia called a press conference. But instead of defending themselves against their critics, they did something unexpected. They invited Carlos, Maria, and dozens of others whose lives had been changed by their programs to tell their stories. For hours, a parade of individuals took the microphone, sharing tales of transformation, of second chances, of lives rebuilt. There were tears, laughter, and moments of raw, powerful truth. By the end, even the most hardened critics in the audience were moved. This event marked a turning point. Instead of shying away from criticism, Michael and Sophia embraced transparency. They acknowledged that their methods weren't perfect, that there was always room for improvement. They invited researchers to study their programs, committed to refining their approach based on data and feedback. Their honesty and willingness to adapt only increased public trust in their mission. Donations poured in, volunteers signed up in droves, and political support for their initiatives strengthened. Michael and Sophia found themselves at the forefront of a growing movement, one that saw homelessness not as an unsolvable problem, but as a challenge that could be met with compassion, innovation, and perseverance. As they entered their golden years, Michael and Sophia began to think about their legacy. They had never been interested in building monuments to themselves or accumulating accolades. Instead, they focused on ensuring that their work would continue long after they were gone. They established a foundation to carry on their mission, carefully selecting and mentoring a new generation of leaders who shared their vision and values. They wrote books, not to glorify their own achievements, but to share the lessons they'd learned and inspire others to take up the cause. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a surprise party. The venue was the very shelter where they had reconnected all those years ago, now expanded and renovated, but still serving as a beacon of hope for those in need. The room was filled with family, friends, and countless individuals whose lives had been touched by their work. As Michael and Sophia looked around at the gathering, they were overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and gratitude. Their eldest grandchild, a thoughtful teenager named Alex, approached them with a gift. It was a scrapbook, filled with letters from people they had helped over the years. As they flipped through the pages, reading message after message of thanks and hope, Michael and Sophia felt a profound sense of fulfillment. "You know," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion, "when I first came up with that crazy plan to disguise myself as a homeless man, I thought I was looking for love. But what I really found was purpose." Sophia squeezed his hand, her eyes shining. "And in finding that purpose, you found love too. We both did." As the party continued around them, Michael and Sophia took a moment to slip outside. The night was clear, the stars twinkling overhead in a way that reminded them of that pivotal evening in Washington Square Park so many years ago. "Do you ever regret it?" Sophia asked suddenly. "Giving up your old life? All that wealth and power?" Michael looked at her, this woman who had seen through his deception, who had challenged him to be better, who had stood by him through every trial and triumph. He thought of the lives they'd touched, the changes they'd made, the family they'd built. "Not for a single moment," he said, drawing her close. "Everything I have, everything I am, it all started the day I met you. You showed me what true wealth really is." They stood there in the cool night air, two people who had found in each other not just a partner, but a purpose. Their journey, from deception to truth, from wealth to worth, from isolation to community, had been long and often difficult. But as they held each other under the vast expanse of sky, they knew with absolute certainty that every step had been worth it. Inside, the sounds of laughter and celebration spilled out into the night. Their family, their friends, the lives they had touched. This was their real legacy. Not the money they'd given away, or the programs they'd built, but the ripples of compassion and hope that would continue long after they were gone. As they turned to rejoin the party, Michael paused for a moment, looking back at the shelter that had been the backdrop for so much of their story. He thought of the man he had been, disguised as a beggar, searching for something he couldn't name. And he thought of the man he had become, standing here with the love of his life, rich beyond measure in all the ways that truly mattered. "Ready to go back in?" Sophia asked, tugging gently on his hand. Michael smiled, feeling a familiar surge of love and gratitude. "Ready," he said, "for whatever comes next." And together, hand in hand, they walked back into the warmth and light, ready to write the next chapter of their extraordinary journey. For Michael and Sophia, every day was a new opportunity to make a difference, to spread love, to prove that one act of compassion could spark a lifetime of change. Their story, of a millionaire who became a beggar to find true love, only to discover a greater purpose, would be told and retold, inspiring generations to come. But for Michael and Sophia, it wasn't just a story. It was their life, their love, their ongoing mission to make the world a little bit better, one life at a time. As the night wore on and the celebration continued, Michael and Sophia found themselves surrounded by the family they had built. Not just their children and grandchildren, but the extended family of lives they had touched over the years. Carlos, now a respected addiction counselor, raised a toast to the couple who had given him a second chance at life. Maria, her hair now streaked with gray, hugged them tightly, whispering thanks for the opportunity they had provided her. In that moment, looking out at the sea of faces, each with their own story of transformation and hope, Michael and Sophia realized that their legacy was not in buildings or programs or policies. It was in people, in the lives changed, the hope restored, the cycles of poverty and despair broken. As the party began to wind down, their youngest grandchild, 5-year-old Lily, climbed into Michael's lap. Grandpa, she said, her eyes wide with curiosity, Mommy says you used to be a different person. Is that true? Michael exchanged a glance with Sophia, seeing in her eyes the same mix of amusement and nostalgia he felt. How could they explain to this child the journey they had been on? Well, Lily, Michael began, choosing his words carefully. A long time ago, I thought that being rich meant having lots of money and fancy things. But then I met your grandma, Sophia, and she taught me that being truly rich means having love in your heart and helping others. Lily considered this for a moment, her small brow furrowed in concentration. So, she said slowly, you and Grandma are the richest people in the world? Sophia laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to light up the room. You know what, sweetie? I think we just might be. As the last of the guests departed and the family began to clean up, Michael and Sophia found themselves back on the small balcony where they had weathered so many storms together. The city stretched out before them, a tapestry of lights and shadows, of struggles and triumphs, of countless stories intertwining with their own. You know, Michael said, wrapping an arm around Sophia's waist. When I first started this journey, I thought I was looking for something I had lost. But what I found was something I never knew I needed. Sophia leaned into him, her presence as comforting and essential as ever. And what was that? She asked, though she already knew the answer. A purpose greater than myself, Michael replied. A love that challenges me to be better every day. A life that's rich in all the ways that truly matter. They stood there in comfortable silence, watching as the first light of dawn began to paint the sky. Another day was beginning, another opportunity to make a difference, to spread kindness, to prove that love and compassion could indeed change the world. So, Sophia said finally, a hint of playfulness in her voice, are you ready for our next adventure? Michael looked at her, this woman who had seen through his disguise to the man he could be, who had loved him not for his wealth, but for his heart. He thought of all they had accomplished and all that still lay ahead. The work was far from over, the need still great. But together, they had proven that change was possible, that one act of kindness could spark a lifetime of transformation. With you, he said, pulling her close. Always. And as the sun rose over the city they had dedicated their lives to serving, Michael and Sophia stepped back into their home, ready to face whatever challenges the new day might bring. Their story, of wealth lost and purpose found, of deception turned to truth, of a love that had the power to change not just 2 lives but countless others, would continue to unfold, a testament to the enduring power of compassion, courage, and unwavering commitment to making the world a better place. In the end, Michael Thornton, once a lonely millionaire, then a searching soul disguised as a beggar, and finally a man rich in all the ways that truly mattered, had found far more than he had ever dreamed possible. He had found love, purpose, and a life overflowing with meaning. And in that he had discovered the greatest wealth of all,